I think Mary can just do a checklist.
Okay,
Everybody's here, so.
all right.
Right, got it.
Okay, changes to the agenda. I don't think there's gonna be any.
Nope.
And we will move on to the board practices assessment.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you there in the space of Zoom meetings. And, my name is Jim Knight. I'm a senior consultant with Special Districts Association of Oregon, here to conduct your board practice assessment. And I've been looking forward to this moment for weeks now, because I just feel so strong about these board practice assessments and how beneficial it can be to organizations to either see how good you really are doing, which is the norm, and then to point out areas that if it's a concern, then it gives you an avenue to do something about it. So I guess my first question would be, has everyone had an opportunity to take a look at the document itself, the board practice assessments?
Yeah.
Very good. So before we get any further, what's really helpful for me is to understand better with amongst you as the board members, is why in the world did you want to become a board member of Sunset Empire Transportation District? What drove you to that? And what joys or challenges have you found in that process? So Charles, let me start with you, if that's okay.
Debbie Boo Smith twisted my arm. No, I'm just kidding. I believe in. So I believe on top of her twisting my arm, I also believe in public transportation. I've lived in areas where it was essential, where just congestion of traffic just made it impossible to get around. So I got real familiar living in Northern California and also in Northern Virginia, where you have to use public transportation, where a 3 mile car ride can take you an hour, depending on what time of day it is. And so I've sort of always believed in it. And I think it's sort of a transition from us, from everybody driving cars to trying to use public transportation obviously for a better, cleaner planet, but also just in general, it's just better for all of us if we can opt out and use public transportation. And I was impressed when I got here that the small little county area had a really great little transit district. So that on top of Debbie twisting my arm is why I'm here.
So when did you join, Charles? When did you first
start? I replaced, I believe, Brian, who was on the board, and he moved back east, and I was appointed to continue his term. Then I was reelected year before last, on my own.
Okay, thank you.
Brian Kidder, I think, is who I replaced.
Rebecca, how long have you been on the board? You're muted, by the way. Mute.
Yeah, that's a rare occurrence for me. Okay, Jim, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rebecca Reed. I was also asked to serve to fill a position that was vacated. Then I was elected in 2020. I believe in public service. I believe that, we all have a responsibility to serve. I believe in public transit. And another objective or another incentive for me was to gain knowledge about the agency, to provide insight and citizen perspective. All of those things, I didn't mean to say insight, to provide oversight. I think that's a really important component in public service as well. But I'm certainly on a learning curve, only having served for a couple of years. So I do rely on other people's perspectives, and as I gain more knowledge about the agency myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pamela, you ready to share your thoughts?
Well, I've been a transit user all my life. I feel it's a very important mode of transportation, which is neglected in many areas. It reduces congestion, reduces air pollution. It is, I think, a misunderstood mode of transportation. With my background as a user and as a retired planner, I hope that I can change part of that perception and make it a efficient mode of transportation. And there are problems with transit using a bus, and hope to, with of course the able staff, to remedy situations.
And how long have you been on the board?
I was appointed, and then I ran for election, and this is my second term.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice talking to you, nice meeting you. Let's see, I'm probably the newest member of the board. I think I've been here 5 months. And I work for the Department of Human Services, Child Welfare, so I work with the systems. And I'm also in the union steward, involved in their union. But part of my reason for wanting to participate in this board, of course, is giving back to my community. And I was making a comment about Sunset Transit because we do a lot of work with Sunset Transit to our clients. And somebody said, well, why don't you get in there and tell this, when I go, get in there and tell them what you do. That's what you like doing, don't you? I said, oh. Anyway, so I had, there were some other boards coming available. One of my friends, I live in Warrington, they said, well, why don't you run for the school board? And I said, no, that's too political. And then I shared my interest with Eddie, and I'm here. And I will tell you that I'm really glad I'm here. It's a board that is well represented, and it keeps, things forward. And I participated in things that were mostly, how can I say this in a nice way? A lot of ideas, a lot of perceptions, but no forward action. What's the term? All talk, but hold on.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm very impressed with this board.
I'm Tracy McDonald. This is my second series. I ran unopposed the first time, had competition the second time, and I enjoyed serving on the board. I worked as a provider when we had the medical ride component, and I always appreciated that. I helped out when we had an intermodal bus, when we had the train and the bus thing, and enjoyed that a lot as a provider. I am the son of a state worker who kind of inspired community involvement with me, and my mom did that quite often. She also worked at Community Action for a while, and so she was an activist person. In fact, we even one time in a community center setting, the 6 of us decided she needed a youth group, and so she decided that all 6 of us would be in a youth group. So anyway, so I appreciate the time on the board. I appreciate working with you guys. I hope the idea is to transport people and provide them areas where they can't go, but they need to go. And we can provide that.
Diana.
So my name is Diana Nino. I have been, well, not lately, but I was a public transportation user for most of my life until I moved to Oregon about 6 years ago. So I'm originally from Colombia, South America, from the capital, 8 million people. And I lived in New York City for 13 years. And throughout all that time, I never needed a driver's license until I moved here. So I moved here and I was a user of our transportation the first 7 months that I lived here on the coast. And then I got my license and my car, and I just really loved how not only that the service was there, that it had a lot of coverage, but also that it was very human scale. So coming from these huge cities with mass transportation systems, this actually had like a face to it. And so in 2018, through my work, I work for a nonprofit that provides social services to the Hispanic community. I was suggested to join the transportation, please help me out, Jeff.
Advisory committee.
Advisory committee. And I joined as a member of the community, and I just loved the process. And when we like finalized all of the plans and all of that, I was so moved by it, it's like we're changing people's lives. I always get emotional.
That's great.
And so when Kathy Kleshik, she was retiring from the board because she was becoming an employee, she approached me and she said, like, would you like to be a member of the board? I had never been in public service. I had no idea what it was, but they told me like, this board is, they're nice. They'll teach you, they'll help you out.
Good.
And it's one of the things I love the most about my life here.
You know, and I love telling the story about Diana. When she was on the Transportation Advisory Committee, that was right after HB 2017 passed, and we got a new infusion of funding, stable funding, and we were required to set up a new committee. And so she ended up joining because I had gone over to, at that time, it was Lower Columbia Hispanic Council, and reached out to their director and said, hey, we'd like to have you represented on this committee. And so he put me in touch with Diana, and that committee had to prioritize all the plans for the expansion of service. They had to prioritize it, so they really had a heavy lift. But it was a great process. But at the end, and this is my favorite part of the story, they applauded each other for the work that they just accomplished, and she started crying. It really was cool.
That's pretty cool. Debbie.
I was recruited by somebody that was running the same year I ran, he lost. So I was really, actually, I had been really involved with my union. I'd been the union president for 6 years. And I was getting ready to step down from there, but I'm a real busy person.
Which union?
AFSCME.
Okay.
And I knew if I stepped down from there, I would be bored and I had to find something to do. So I was looking for different boards to try to get on when I was approached and said, hey, why don't you run with me and we'll both get on there and we'll just kick some ass. And at the time, I didn't know Jeff very well, but I'd heard a few things which were really good, but they were untruths. So my coming on board was a lot different than what it has, my expectations were a lot different than what they have been. And by being on the board, I have learned that Jeff is very good at what he does. He comes up with some fantastic ideas. And it's been a real positive thing. So I've been on 3 years. I think I have to run for re-election next year.
Yeah.
So,
And she jumped right in. She wanted to be an officer right off the bat. She wanted to be
No, I-
treasurer, you know, and how does that mean? I said, you sign checks. And the next thing she knew, she blinked and she became board chair.
3 meetings, we've been 3 meetings.
Wow. Became board chair?
Yeah, it was,
Because I hired our board chair.
We try to recruit people that want to become involved.
Sure, that makes sense.
because when they first said, well, do you want to be secretary treasurer? I'm going, gee, I don't have a whole lot of time yet, so all I have to do is sign checks.
That's what they told me.
Yeah. And the third meeting, I became the chairperson.
Gotcha. So Jeff and I have known each other for quite a while. I moved here in 2014. And shortly after, I became involved in multiple different organizations as a board member, from Northwest Act to Cedar to Colpac, and then interaction with Special Districts Association. That's how Jeff and I came into contact. So I know a little bit about Jeff. I know that you used to work at Costco. From Costco, you came here. How did that transition come about? How long was that?
I semi-retired from Costco after a little over a 24-year career with them. And before them, I worked at some other retailers, but I knew I wanted to, I wasn't ready to fully retire, but I wanted to get into, smaller government, municipal government, because I had been elected official in the city of Warrenton and at the county level. And this opportunity came up in the springtime of 2014. And so I applied for it and I was a finalist. I wasn't selected. That's okay. That gave me the summer off to my wife and I could do a bunch of traveling and we did and had a great time together. But then things didn't work out with the person that they hired. And so they contacted me in the fall and I came back and interviewed again in the fall and I was fortunate they hired me. And it was necessary for me to go back to work because doing all this traveling, my wife spent a lot of money, so I needed some income again. But, and actually I spent just as much as she did. I love what I do. I love public transportation. I got involved at the state level, and now working on some things that are gonna end up rolling out nationally too. So I love what I do. I love it.
Good, thanks. Mary, I don't want to leave you out, so what's your greatest joy in working here?
Well, I don't know. I think just serving the public, like, we provide such needed service. It's a joy to, I worked at the county health department for 9 years prior to here and then worked at the hospital. I'm a lab tech to begin with, so I could dissect things out and find out how they operate. But anyway, but I think the real joy is knowing that, I know I told people this, it's unbelievable what it takes to run transportation. All the different wheels you have, it is unbelievable. And I'm just glad to be part of that. Seen a lot of people come and go since I've been here. And we've been so blessed with great employees and people that we all kind of feel the same, that from the drivers to, everybody's dedicated for what they're doing. And trying to find the answers if there's a problem, always. It's wonderful.
I'd like to just share just a few things about me so they can have a sense of my background and what really drove me to this moment. As some of you know, I moved here in 2014 to become the executive director of the Port of Astoria and was able to keep my head above water for about almost 5 years. And during that 5 years, there's probably the most contentious period of time I've ever had in my life of working with board members. And I knew that even before I left the Port of Astoria, I really wanted to become involved with special districts because I really believe in their mission of trying to help organizations just like you to be everything that you want to be. And more importantly, to help keep you out of trouble. And not keeping your eyes on those problem spots is what can cause those problems. And it causes friction among board members. So I am still very active. I serve on the Astoria Authority Board. I've been each one of the positions as president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. I think I'm going on my 4th year there. I'm still a member of the Northwest Act as a citizen at large for El Paso County, and I still enjoy the participation. Where I've kind of migrated to in my role with Northwest Act has actually been in the airport side of the business. So each act appoints a member to the Oregon Aviation Board. It's called the Aviation Review Committee. And the responsibility of that committee is to review all airport grants in the state of Oregon. That organization, the Aviation Review Committee, began, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago. I think I'm close. And I was there for our very first meeting, and this was a statutory requirement that the Department of Aviation needed an impartial committee to review all grants. And this decision was made to select a member from each act. So there's 12 acts in the state of Oregon. And our Northwest Act appointed me to that committee. And that committee appointed me as the first chairman, and I've been the chairman of that committee ever since the beginning. It's been an amazing opportunity to learn about airports in the state, but more importantly was to provide my talents towards guiding our committee to how do we successfully review grant requests impartially and give a recommendation to the aviation board for which grants should be funded. And so we had to create our own rules of how we went about doing that. How did we prioritize one grant over another? And if there were ties in the scoring, then we had to come up with a methodology of how would we break those ties. So I strongly believe in the role that boards can provide to nonprofit organizations and to agencies just like yours. So the BPA process is really that mechanism that Special Districts has come up with to work with you as the members to go over those 6 specific categories to help you have a discussion amongst you about what are your individual perceptions on how well things are going in each of those 6 categories. Please.
And I just wanted to comment, I've seen some of your actions or your accomplishments prove yourself, so.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also serve on the act.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
and what was encouraging to me was the remarking back on the Port of Astoria. When I went down to Newport and we had board training in that area. And when I first went down there, it was really heartening to see Mr. Spence across the way.
Yeah.
And I said, Frank, he says, yeah, they decided that I needed to come to this. And I said, that's a good thing.
Yeah. It is a real good thing.
Yeah.
Most of my career has been in the port business. I was the marine terminal director for the Port of Olympia. Before that, I was the marketing manager. I had built a cold storage at the Port of Tacoma. I've been around trucking, distribution, most of my life. And most of my professional career has been in senior management within port districts. So I have an affinity towards ports, but there is so much similarity. To me, it doesn't really matter the function of the district. It's the function of the board itself and the similarities of what are your responsibilities and duties and opportunities. They're the same across the board with most districts. So I am a firm believer in this document that's been presented to you. I got to know the author of this. Mr. Mills was really quite a person. I think that, were you here when he came before?
Yep.
He and I have had a lot of conversations about the dynamics of how this process works and how to fine tune this to the position where it is today. So let's get into this, because I'm excited about it, and unless you have any questions at all at this point. Anyway. All right, so why don't you take a look at the document itself, it's a scoring sheet. And I think you saw in my email that the purpose of sending this ahead of time was to give you an opportunity to think about those, categories. I purposely wanted to wait till this meeting to get in kind of the detailed questions of each one of those categories to help us have some spontaneous interaction about your personal feelings. There's no right or wrong answers today. We're not doing any type of a particular scoring other than remarkably for boards is to find consensus that we all agree that this is the position that we're in. So for instance, on the very first page, when you look at the board duties and responsibilities, you can see that there's a rating of good, there's caution, and then danger. And each one of those components are something that we're going today is to come up with a consensus of how you as a board member feel how we're doing in those categories. Then, at the end of the day, when we're all done, I'm going to take all of the scoring and your comments and my notes and then go back home and I'll draft up a recommendation of the findings and suggestions, recommendations. If only I can help. That's my motivation. Is there a way that I personally can help this become an even better organization than it is? And that's kind of the joy of why I wanted to come here. I've known Jeff and what type of a leader that he is. And I'm confident just going into this that I'm going to have to work pretty hard just to find something that's not good. I think that the impression for me as a citizen in our community, I live in Napa with my wife and 7 ducks and 5 chickens and 3 dogs, and 2 parakeets, a cockatiel, and a bunch of turtles.
I do not want our wives getting together. We're down to 2 dogs, and I'm good with that.
Well, the one thing that I found, other than the joy of being around these wonderful animals on a daily basis, is that because of COVID, I can't go anywhere. And really, because of the birds, I can't go anywhere because somebody's got to get them up in the morning and somebody's got to put them to bed every single night and somebody's got to feed them. So it has minimized my travel because over my career, I've traveled way too much. And it's nice to be able to stay at home. My wife and I, we made a commitment that when we moved here, this was going to be our final home. This is really where we wanted to stay. And in spite of my departure, as wild as it was from the port of Astoria, this is home for us. And I truly want to continue to give back to my community because I love it. My father was born and raised in Oregon. He grew up in Salem and Albany. My grandfather grew up in Albany. I need to get on Ancestor.com to go back to how far back in Oregon does our family actually go. I believe that it goes back quite a way. So Oregon has always felt like home to me. But the Pacific Northwest and the coastal areas, this is where I thrive personally. So I don't have a desire to go anywhere except for where we are and help make our community better. So here we go. Let's talk about the very first item about the board duties and responsibilities. And the first issue is your perception as an individual of, do you think that you are adhering to standards of good stewardship? So let me just kind of broaden your perspective a little bit, what I'm talking about. It's your perspective, truly as the community's perspective on how well you're doing. As a board, that's kind of where you want to be responsive to your patrons, you want to be responsible to the community and the constituents. But so you as an individual board member, what is your perception about, are you as a board performing as good stewards of the assets of this organization?
So I feel that we do. I checked us in the good category in there. I also said that I made a comment that we try to do what we say we're going to do. Okay.
Okay, that's good. Anybody else?
Rebecca?
Rebecca?
When I started in on this, I asked myself a question. What is the polling showing from the community, like the riders, our vendors, our partners, about our performance? And it's sometimes, you can get real involved in stuff, and then you down the road a piece, you go, oops, boy, I should have checked up on this other aspect of performance, so I know we probably have that data, but to me, we have a unique position here where we get a lot of internal information, and we see the inner workings, and we see the performance data. I mean, how the agency is working and accomplishing its goals. But I'll admit I don't use public transit here at the coast because I'm retired, but I used it for many, many years in the Portland metro area on a very consistent basis, work to home. And I would have more of an opinion from my past experience than I do now. So I guess what I'm saying is that I wrote down here that I see the board taking its responsibility seriously. So I think both of those items on board duties and responsibilities, I think gives high marks from what the observations are. But honestly, I don't really know enough about, the other side of the coin, which is the users, end users, polling, and what their beliefs are about our performance. I know we're supposed to talk about the board, but it is that other side of the coin.
You brought up a good point about performance metrics. Can you help me understand what that means?
Well, we provide the board every month, I give them our ridership data, as drilled down by different routes and what our ridership increases, or what the actual ridership is for each route, and whether it increase or decrease. And, of course, the past few years they've been decreases, but that's started to turn. So they're able to see what the impact of our service is.
Okay. So those of you that use the system, so Pamela, your good input.
Well, to go back, what Rebecca's saying is that I don't feel that, we certainly don't know what the non-users, how they feel, why they don't take it. And I think in part, I think there's a focus on seniors and low income, which there should be. But that doesn't mean that the rest of users or potential users shouldn't be addressed. I also feel at times that I'd like to see like a meeting of all the users, free pizza, yes, we can't do alcohol, but free pizza, and what they feel. It's because it's very difficult to, in a survey, no matter how objective you write it, doesn't address your concerns, or sometimes people don't even know what you mean by it. So that would be my concern.
Okay, thank you. Charles, what's your perception on governance?
Governance. Governance is one of those words that actually, if someone asked you what it meant out of context, you'd probably get 10 different answers. I think, though, to hit on a point that Pamela said, I think that we suffer from what the nationwide suffers from, the usage of people driving their cars or taking public transportation. I grew up in Texas, where we told someone you were taking a bus somewhere, they wonder what's wrong with you. Did you get your car repossessed, or is your car not running? Because they often had an idea if it's a car or nothing. And I think we suffer a little bit from what nationwide people suffer. If there's an option of a car in their transportation or public transportation, people often choose their car. I think we working hard to bridge that out here. I think that Jeff has put a lot of policies and things in place that are trying to lure non-traditional bus riders in. So that would be a constant effort. I think we need to continue moving forward, trying to figure out how to bridge that gap, because in the end, we want more ridership, and the more ridership we have, the fewer cars on the road, the less traffic. So that's kind of how I look at that. And I'm not sure if I answered the question or skated around it, but that's kind of how I see the governance picture.
So, go ahead. Diana.
So on like the items of stewardship and governance, I also would give us high marks in the sense that I do think that we try to do the most we can with what we have. And the way that Mick did earlier, there are so many pieces that have to come together that often, from an outsider point of view, you can't really know why is it that, oh, why don't they extend this route or whatever. But for us who are trying, to make the most with what we have, there are certain things that just can't be done. But I do think that all of us, with the wonderful leadership of Jeff and all our staff, everybody's trying to do the best with the money that we have, the grants that are available, like everything that we can possibly use, we're putting it to the service of our community. So I think that's good governance on our part.
So with the board's responsibility of being good stewards of your assets are your staff. Obviously, it's the financial capabilities, it's their equipment, it's the buses, it's a relationship with the community. As a board, how do you then, two of you say, we think we're doing really good. Is that a fair consensus of everyone? Does anybody feel that we're not doing really good?
I'd like to make a comment. Like I mentioned, I work for Child Welfare, Property Human Services, and a lot of our customers, a lot of our clients are at the mercy of public transportation. We are at the mercy of public transportation, and I when I started working here, the biggest trick was to get people to Portland for their medical and all that stuff. Of course, we have a volunteer driver program that comes out of St. Helens. And I don't know why we don't have a volunteer driver program through our agency here, but it's never happened.
Is that in private vehicles or is that in the?
No, those are volunteer drivers with their private vehicles and they get reimbursed mileage. And of course, the COVID has kind of slashed back on that one. But in terms of, in terms of serving our marginalized society and just people across the board, it's been my experience that before I started on this board that Sunset was very responsive to the needs of the community and to, I would have to say, to nonprofits and public agencies. I think we've always had a great relationship with Sunset, and they've always been very helpful. And I will tell you that I call it the commuter bus from I don't know, I call it the direct commuter bus from here to Portland. And a lot of people had a hard time understanding the use of that, but it's a great source. Because getting from here to Portland is kind of tricky for a lot of people.
Pamela.
Well, I'm a word person, as this board will tell you, and
You're a what person?
word. And,
So word, okay.
This is what bothers me about when people talk about transit. I would, and I know you didn't mean this, at the mercy of, rather than Sunset provides a need in the community. And that's what I mean about a perception. you don't even know you're doing it. And I know you don't mean that in terms of the negative, but if you hear it from the outside, it seems like someone's begging, please, please, please take me, and rather than Sunset provides a need.
Let's get into just a little bit more detail on governance practices. Let me start with, do you feel as a board that this is a safe place to work?
Absolutely.
Do you think that the employees feel that this is a safe place to work? This is the governance portion of board responsibilities. You have that responsibility to make sure that that's correct. Go ahead.
So I think, I'm looking at our response to COVID and what we rolled out during that. And as we had the sanitary techs on every bus, on every route, wiping down, making sure that people sat 6 feet apart so that our bus drivers didn't have to work at that. And as soon as it was all possible, we started putting up plexiglass between the bus drivers and passengers. So if you look at that, or if I look at that, if they're doing that much in that short of time for something like that, I feel that we have to be taking care of our staff in other ways, not just for COVID. But I don't think our response would have been that fast, that total, if we weren't doing it in other ways, in other areas. So, and we don't hear about any accidents or workers' comp, so I'm assuming we probably don't have any or very, very few.
We have very good workers' comp right now.
Do you think that the patrons, the riders themselves feel safe?
Can I relate a story since I'm now a bus rider? I sat across from an older, very distinguished looking gentleman who I found out was homeless and on his way up to Astoria to apply for housing in the Astor Hotel. And he says, I've been couch surfing with these folks in Cannon Beach for probably 6 or 8 months. And this is the first opportunity where I've been able to actually look for permanent housing. And he says, I feel safe on your bus.
That's great.
So.
Pamela?
Well, I guess the one I had concerns when, and this is a very touchy topic, but still, that not everyone in working for Sunset would take a vaccine. And I don't feel safe because of that. And two, I would take the bus back and forth between here and Portland every weekend when I was working, and so I arrived here at night. And I can't say I feel safe here at night, not because intrinsically it's an unsafe place, but I'm a street person in terms of I walk a lot of places, some you wouldn't believe. So I'm not a scaredy cat in terms of that. But so I always scope out an area, what happens if I have an encounter and there is no place at night open. So I think, and now I'm not as fast as I used to be, the closest place would be the voodoo room, who would probably be drunk by the time I got there. So that part does bother me in terms of traveling, and especially if I have a suitcase. And I think that would probably be true of other people now. Most people don't do what I do. But that's, and then the other thing was, we talked about it, and Stephanie, she could handle a gorilla. But to make sure that she's safe, previous person in her position felt unsafe. And sometimes people aren't always a cheery bunch of group. And I want to make sure in front of Stephanie that she's taken care of. So I don't know. I know we talked about it just to make sure, maybe if there's a button, because oftentimes, because it's not a lot of staff. So if there's somebody else in the building that Stephanie could buzz if something got out of hand. And that's, and it's not have to do with the homeless. It has, because I traveled before, there was a problem. And a lot of times, if they're just homeless. And there's I guess I'm upset that our landscaping is, to prevent homeless and fires. And I just can't accept that we're in that state. And you just say hello. There's these kids walking around in barefoot. They're just not, I'm not saying that there aren't some people who may be a little less than friendly, but they're just, I guess that's all I have to say.
So the question for you as the board is overall, as far as governance and the things that I'm sure there's more topics to cover under governance, but just from the safety factor of staff, the organization, buildings, your patrons, vendors, do you feel as a board that you're doing a good job of ensuring that there is good governance of those issues?
Yeah.
Yes.
Jim,
Yes, Rebecca.
I know that we're trying, you're trying to get us to move along and everything and gather the kind of data that you want, which is actually pretty flat. The good, cautious, or danger, and I think this is a good conversation. And I do appreciate that, our anecdotes may, take a little more of our time, but we don't often have this opportunity. And one of the things that I'm going to go ahead and, add to this before we move on to the next area is about when there are employees, something I don't know very much about is that when there are employee issues where there's a discipline issue or something goes awry, that actually is a point where there could be some honest airing of grievances by the employee. I know that these things are handled in HR and there's a reason for privacy, but it is yet another opportunity for us to gain some unvarnished, information from employees about how they are perceiving the agency. I know it's not easy to navigate that territory, but it is, like I said before, it is the other side of the coin that we don't know about very much, but maybe it would inform us as a board to be able to answer questions such as yours in this polling and evaluation process. Thank you.
We do have a section that's coming up that does talk about the relationship of the organization to its employees and the policies. So I'm glad you brought that up, Rebecca. It gives us a little more meat that when we get into that section, we can talk about that stuff.
All right, thank you.
Let's move on to the operational compliance and starting with the overall regulatory compliance. Do you as board members feel comfortable in that you're in compliance with all, it's a difficult mouthful to say, but all regulations that are imposed upon your organization from, Lord knows there's no end to the agencies probably that have some input or desire for information from you. But what's your perception as a board of how well you believe that this organization is in compliance with regulations?
Can you give some examples of operational compliance?
Sure. So do you feel that you're up to speed on regulations regarding environmental issues, which just by nature of having buses, that's got to be an issue that comes up probably fairly frequently. not only just the operation of the buses, but everything else that goes along with making those buses run. There certainly are a number of agencies, OSHA is one of them, that would certainly have some input to the well-being and safety of the employees that are working on equipment. The drivers, the operators, are they qualified? Have they gone through appropriate testing, through legitimate process in the hiring process? So compliance is a gamut, is a huge number of things that could fall under compliance, from personnel actions and laws to operational facilities. So
I would cite the example of us, in this last meeting, participating in the statewide, study on, environmental issues. So I believe that not only are we in compliance, but I think our management actively participates and by approval of that, he brings that to us to be in pretty much leadership of some of that things, so.
are there outstanding non-compliance issues that have popped up in the last 6 months or so?
That's a good question.
That's the man.
Can I say something here? Can you guys pay attention to the people that are on Zoom?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can y'all check the Zooms, please?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so Rebecca, I'll do a better job of keep looking up at the screen.
Thank you, that's helpful.
I'm probably missing your arm, so.
It's easy to forget.
Yeah,
I've been, my hand's been up so long, even my regular arm is tired. I'll take my hand down.
Okay. We'll put it back up, Charles. Now's your turn.
Sorry.
I see it.
See, to me, although we're board members, I think we have other lives that are not the transit district. So, and I think that's our confidence in our executive director and his staff, that they are compliant with all the necessary government requirements and that are required and expected of them. And Jeff and his staff do a great job of that. But to ask the board, do we know every little OSHA compliant or every little internal board, government compliant issue would be really asking too much. I'm not sure I'd want to be on a board that I'd have to go through all that every day. I'm sure they do a lot of that compliance work that we don't really hear about. So I would say they do a great job of staying in compliance. And I think often in the packet, there's so many things in there that are compliant related that I don't necessarily understand, but Jeff real good at explaining those sort of things. And so I think our compliance comes down to my personal belief that our board, our executive director and his staff are really good at being compliant with regulations. I don't have time to go through all those things myself, of course.
So Rebecca, are you in concurrence with that?
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was absolutely, I feel a high level of confidence that, I just lost you because I was pushed too many buttons. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. I'll get my video back again. But yeah, that I give high marks for that because, we do really have good updates and a lot of good data about what we're being in compliance and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I would just like to say that I have, as the newest person on the board, I have been impressed by Jeff's focus on staying on course with regulation and compliance. It's been my observation that he does a good job on that and addresses those presentations to the board. Good information.
Anybody else have comments?
So I take from what I have seen in the past, and Mary and Sue have both reported to us when you had a big project, you were purging files and that type of stuff, and and Sue going over the policies, doing, so I think we get reported to when they're into a big project like that, maybe they're a little bit behind, but they're catching up on it. So I feel that anytime something like that happens, it is being reported to us, so we know
That's good.
whether or not maybe they're behind on something, or they've just found out something that they need to catch up on. So if I don't hear anything, and I always get in trouble when I assume, but if I don't hear anything, I'm assuming everybody's up to date with what they're supposed to be doing.
No news is good news.
That's right.
You know, it's a very tricky issue as a board member, particularly on these compliance issues. You only know what's been told to you. And if you're not being told, then obviously you don't know, but you're assuming based upon your historical relationship with your leadership, whether or not you have trust. And that's kind of the issue that I want to get at is there's a thin line between governance and interruption or interfering. Because it really is a staff responsibility that's going to be dealing with compliance issues. But because you're the overseers, there's also a responsibility at the board level to be knowledgeable and to have confidence if there is a problem, that you're well informed. And I would have said coming into the meeting, I'm very confident Jeff is doing exactly what you're reporting, is that he would say, here's a problem that just popped up and I need you to know about it. I don't need you to do anything about it because I'll take care of it, but I want you to know as a board member. And I would imagine that's a fairly common reaction between the board and current staff.
Got
So,
Charles up there.
Charles, thank you.
In the end, the Jeff answers to the board. I guess we determine his performance once a year. And I think if he was not doing that, we would address it in his performance evaluation, also in that meeting we have with him to discuss his next contract. So I think that gives us a way we can, that sort of thing accumulates over the year, and then you're able to say to him, you know, you reported all these miscompliance all year long, that somehow take away from the job performance. So I think in the end, we have to trust that we've done the right thing by extending Jeff, but we also have the knowledge of knowing that we can address that when it comes around to his evaluation as well. So not trying to sound threatening or anything, but I think that's the way we take care of that, is to address it in the evaluation.
So from your comments, how I'm interpreting it is that you feel pretty good about the compliance issue. The next question is a little trickier, and it kind of is the timeliness of compliance, and that I always love asking this question, well, how do you know? So how do you know if the organization is compliant? And typically you only know if you happen to see a letter or your leadership informs you, oh, by the way, we forgot to do some compliance reporting documents, whether it's for Department of Environmental Quality or OSHA, and you get a warning letter, and then that becomes an issue. So in terms of timeliness, are you feeling pretty comfortable that whatever are the required reports that need to be turned in are happening in a timely manner? That is your overall sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Becky, you're muted again.
The operable word is trust, I mean, isn't that just what all humans have to do? Use your best judgment in determining that the messenger has credibility. And, I think something would, we'd see signs of trouble. We would have seen signs of trouble with non-compliance by this time.
Yeah.
And I would refer, in history times, the times that I've been on the board, where we've had the timeliness issues, when we were negotiating and with Columbia Transit and the issues that they were having, and they weren't fulfilling their parts of the contract, management was on it right away. And so I don't see, and they, within their time limits, did make us aware. So we were aware.
Okay. So the next issue is kind of, this is more exploratory perhaps on your part, but, and staff may be able to give a better evaluation of the next issue is what's coming down the pipe that kind of worries you a little bit regarding compliance reporting? What are the challenges that you see as an organization in being able to keep up with compliance requests and demands? I knew you were going to. And I actually have a note here is ask Jeff about that.
One of the biggest challenges we've had over the last couple of years is getting our audits done on time. We're at the mercy,
Financial audits?
yeah,
Okay.
we're at the mercy of our auditors. And number one, we changed auditors a few years ago because our previous auditing firm pulled out of the North Coast. And so they backed away from us as well. So we put an RFP out and we only had one response. And while we like the firm that we're working with, they're experiencing through COVID, just like everybody else, and they're short-staffed. So we're suffering on getting our audits done in a timely fashion.
Okay.
We still do not have our 21 audit.
Hasn't been performed yet?
It performed, it just hasn't been presented to the board yet or submitted to the Secretary of State.
Okay, so the deadline is the end of 21.
End of December, yeah.
And have you been in communication with?
Yeah, Kelly's been constantly pestering our finance officer.
Yeah,
Pestering.
I'm sure this is not a unique situation in
No.
the state whatsoever.
No.
I'm sure the state understands. Interesting.
But it needs to be done, you know, we need that information, so.
So why do you think only one response on RFPs?
I don't know, I sent it out to a dozen CPA firms. I don't know,
Who does your audit now?
Heisler.
All right, so,
It's not just a question of the state, but if there's some troubleshooting, what we're a year, or whatever it is,
yeah,
that's why you have an audit.
right.
And
Yeah.
so they're not fulfilling the function of the audit.
Yeah, and we've had turnover in our finance department too. You know, Kelly's only been with us for a year, you know, so that's, you know, whenever I lose a finance officer, that's my biggest
Yeah,
ulcer
yeah.
creating bug.
Bigger than
Well, but that's my biggest thing is the audit not having been submitted on time. Because that could be a problem, you know, not only with the Secretary of State, compliance reasons, but we're required through ODOT also, you know, and ODOT, they don't push the buttons, you know, like the Secretary of State could, but they could if they wanted, they could hold back our funding if
Sure.
we're not compliant.
But we've got a section about financial control, so coming up in a minute, we can maybe get into that just a little bit more, but that's good. Any other concerns or issues? Diane?
So there's two projects that have been on the table for a long time. They're very expensive, but it's something that has worried me for a long time in terms of compliance. So it's not legal compliance. So it's two. One is the bus stop at Ensign Lane by the Costco area, that because we want to do a really beautiful pullover station, that bus stop has a lot of traffic and it's just this horrible little bench. It has nothing to protect our riders from the rain, from the sun. It just feels so exposed. And because it's so expensive to the way we want to do it, then it has just gone year after year without any type of making it, so it's not a legal compliance, but yeah, it's a bus stop that it's not proper, it's not comfortable, it's not good. The other one is moving our operations lot out of the tsunami zone. And it's so expensive, and it's not just the money, but finding the lot. It's a huge project that involves getting all the grants, getting all of that. But it's worrisome that our huge investment is on the tsunami zone. And moving out of there, I don't know when we'll be able to do it.
And I have, and I wrote down there, we're also limited in what we can do as our compliances when we're talking about the pandemic and what's gonna happen with that. So we're challenged in that because we don't know what's gonna happen in the future.
So talk about a little bit more, what are the things that are the challenge regarding COVID and your requirements for employees and
Correct.
safe working and not only employees, but I would imagine also the writers too.
Right, and riders and ridership, and we're trying to build ridership up, but we still have the same challenges health-wise for that and protecting our staff from, so that they can come to work.
So how do you keep up on what are the current regulations regarding employees staffing to COVID? How do you keep up on those
We have,
weekly changes?
Well, ours really hasn't changed since that court decision that struck down the masking requirement. And every transit agency, well, a lot of transit agencies within minutes dropped their mask mandate. And it's up to the individual transit agencies or authorities of what they want to do locally. But as far as mandates from the FTA, there are none right now.
SDAO, I don't know if you've get opportunities, but they have an enormous amount of information about keeping districts up to speed on changes to the laws regarding employee management in relationship to COVID. I don't know if you ever get onto their website to take a look at those things, but they're conducting seminars, educational opportunities, there's periodicals that come out.
We all get all those emails.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
All right, so when it comes to then this last of the compliance challenges, just my impression of listening is it kind of puts us in a caution zone. And obviously you got to keep your eyes on that audit issue of performance. What are your things? This isn't to be my score, this is the consensus score, or what's your feelings?
Sunset is not the culprit in a way. So I don't like caution. It's worrisome, that's for sure, but there's nothing, they're doing everything they can, and it's very frustrating. And I also think that, that the onus is definitely on the audit company, and that should be reflected into a cautionary rating is not warranted.
And that's documented. And that is documented, that the caution or the reason we're behind is not our fault. That's documented. So I agree with you. Just saying.
Okay. Good. Charles?
Is it possible? Yeah, I agree with Pamela. I don't want to show caution when there's something out of our hands. Can we denote that in that final column that we gave it a good, but we also noted that the only concern is the audit, or is that column not for that assessment? Go with good because I think we're good with compliance, but obviously the audit is a concern, all right?
Okay. Appreciate it. Guillermo?
Talk about personality, okay, would like caution in terms of the COVID and the monkey. I wanna say monkey paw because it's a short story, whatever the disease is called. Just to, they're supposed to change that name, but that, and just to be updated, I presume that the buses are still being cleaned on a regular basis. And maybe just to put that in a report just to keep myself calm anyway, and just to know it's going on.
Okay.
But because I think there's going to be, I think the country is going to have a slow response if there's with the disease, so I think it's up to us to be sort of the watchdogs for our section of the world.
So if I rephrase that whole,
Oh, would you like to rephrase it? I can put
I
it
think
back.
so. You give me additional information. It's very,
Okay.
very helpful. Is that,
Okay, oh, do you want me to rephrase it?
no,
Oh,
I want to repeat back what I'm hearing, what you're saying about this issue is that with potential challenges, yes, you know that there are potential challenges, but you feel good about your ability to handle those challenges. And if there was one area that's a little worrisome beyond your control at this point, it would be keeping your eyes on the issue of the audit. Is that
Yeah.
kind of fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's
Great statement.
Is that what you're gonna say, Pamela?
exactly.
Was that Pamela over here or Pamela over?
All right, so like I said, we're gonna get right into the budget and the finances. So the first question, do you feel as a board that there is consistency in, I should put the word in here, consistency in the budgeting process? And does the budget meet the needs of the organization?
Okay.
Diana, she beat you to it.
Thank you. So I joined the board when we were already in kind of like a good spot recovering. So from some financial crisis that from what I've heard, I don't know the full story, but I do know that it was substantial. And the way that they did it to recover, I think has also set a standard on transparency. So I've heard from multiple people that join our budget committees, members of the public, that they're like, this is really organized, this is really well done, this is very clear, like this is the first budget meeting that we can get it done before noon and we don't have to stay here. So that, considering that I have a lot of experiences on boards and public service, it makes me feel very confident that our budgeting is pretty, clear and consistent and that it's not sketchy, like so I would say that we're in the good category for that.
How do you feel about your budget committee itself?
I
Is it
like
a
it.
good group of people knowledgeable about the issues?
They add a
Sufficient
considerable-
number of them?
Yes,
Okay.
and they add a considerable expertise to the process. They seem to work well with us. I'm very pleased with the sitters that we have.
We've come a long way.
We have, yeah.
We've come a
It
long.
wasn't always that way, so.
And we even had a full board, or we had a full committee this year.
Yes,
Full committee, full board, good members, good, that are confident and just been here for a while and I came, when we were in Ashes. So it's just wonderful that the board and the budget committee work so well together. We're in a really good place, I think.
The efficiency has improved, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay, Rebecca?
Well, that's fine. I'm just in line. I just wanted to say that, put in my 2 cents to say that I feel that it is a transparent process when we're dealing with the budget. And again, I do rely currently, as I'm on the learning curve, on others' deeper knowledge for this area. But, when you're having multiple messages, that are from different sources that are saying the same thing, to me, that sounds like it builds my level of trust. Thank you.
So when the budgets are presented to the board, I know it's gonna sound like a crazy question, but it does have, are the budgets, is the budget that is recommended by the budget committee, does that come back to the board as a balanced budget?
say that again?
Is the budget that's presented to you as the board for approval, is that a balanced budget? So,
Yes.
okay,
Yes,
Good.
yes.
it is a state, that's why I asked the question sometimes, well, it doesn't always happen exactly that way, but through conversation, we get it. We finally do approve a budget that's balanced.
It doesn't leave our table until it's done.
All right,
And
so,
also if there are things that need to be moved afterwards because there was a surplus or something, we are explained very clearly why it's done and where it's going and we always know where things go.
Yeah.
And why.
the next question, we've already touched base on, and that was about the audit. Is it up to speed in the audit, so we don't really need to go over that. I'd like to give that some thought internally with SDAO to see if there's any recommendations that they may have for other auditors. If you're not getting responsiveness from auditors, let's spread the net even further if possible to see if there's recommendations for an auditing firm that's affordable. Sometimes they're available, but you can't, it's too much.
That is one good thing, they haven't raised their rates on us, so.
So overall, the consistency of budgeting, and from what I'm hearing, is you feel very good about the process itself, the way the committee behaves, that you're doing the best with what you had to work with. And most importantly, it's a balanced budget on an annual basis.
And we have no debt.
And just to move us along, the soundness of your financial practices goes kind of in line with that. I guess I could ask the question, what is the process that when checks are written, can you talk a little bit about when I was at the board, we had a check run. Our process was that we had multiple signers on the checks. We had two individuals. Our chief financial officer would oversee the work of our senior accounting manager, and he would do the check run. And then a commissioner would come in to sign the checks. That was the treasurer. And then I would wait till the treasurer signed off on the checks, and then I would sign the check. So there's two signers on every single check within that organization.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be that way, but it's a pretty safe way. Is that the process that
You just described our process to the T.
That is exactly what we do.
Perfect.
And to add to that, since I'm the secretary treasurer, if for any reason I can come to sign the checks, then often will be our chair who
Okay.
also steps in, but yeah, the two signatures are in there. And then if the checks, I forget the amount, if they go past a certain amount, then they're given to us on our board meeting packets, the monthly packets, to explain where those come from. So the board, and because it's a public document, the public itself can also get an idea of what those big checks have been made for and to.
And we consider the big checks, anything over $5,000 is listed in the board pack in the financial reports. We don't list the whole check runs.
Do you ever run into a situation where you have an expenditure, but there's no money left in that line item account within the budget? Does that issue come up very often?
Well,
And then if so, how do you handle it?
within the line items, under like materials and services, I don't necessarily care too much about those line items. Yeah, we want to be as close as possible to our projection during the budget process, but it's that bottom line, total materials and services,
Sure.
that we can't overspend that
Right.
without a supplemental.
Yeah.
So, and I've explained that to the board where, fuel prices, for example, they went up, and so we started, usually we're ahead of the game in fuel purchases because we kind of pad it until this past year. We used up all the money. We did have to do a supplemental for that one.
Okay.
And historically, we've made changes in computer software to better reflect how we can, so that we could see in plain day where this category is, what's coming out of that. we were limited by our other software.
Once you change your county software.
We used to use QuickBooks. like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not designed for us, so.
Sure. You found something that's more in line with transportation?
Yeah, well, yeah, for the different fund accounting, we're not happy with it, but, you know, I'm not gonna, well, spend a whole bunch of money again right now, but
Yeah.
we're gonna continue to look for another accounting software that is not very good.
Okay. Let's talk about your relations with customers. In this case, your primary customers are certainly your riders. But in a sense, so is the whole community in a sense, because it's, you know, it reflects on them as well. As they're proud to be a part of this community that has a really good mass transit system. Ridership opportunities to get to other areas outside of our region. So when it talks about customers, let's talk a little bit about the management of service problems. What is your sense of the board when a problem pops up? And I'm dreaming up issues, but a upset rider comes to the office to register a complaint. Does those complaints get to you as board members? Okay.
Usually they tell us at the monthly meetings what was the issue and what has already been done to
Okay.
correct it. So then we get if there's a letter, if it was an email, like whatever the interaction was, we are told the entire story and what has been done.
So what's your overall perception then of the management of customer service?
I would say that they're responsive to the needs of customers.
I don't know recently, but I do know that since we've done so much better at posting information in English and in Spanish, that has made it more welcoming. That if somebody had a complaint or anything, that they could actually express it, even if they don't speak English. So I do know that years ago, before I was a board commissioner, that I had been told about there were there were bad interactions with drivers, let's say, and the rider felt discriminated against. And they had no idea how to make that complaint. But this was years ago. But then by now, I think that by seeing everything in English and Spanish, like it makes it more like, yeah, you can come and talk to us, or it makes it a little more open. So I think that's been a huge improvement on our part.
Is that posted in every bus? If the person has a complaint, gives direction as to where they should go to file a complaint?
There's not posting on the bus per se.
How do they find out? How do they get the information, where to go with it?
Well, a lot of times they'll just come in here, talk to the staff at the front windows,
Walk in the door.
or they'll pick up the phone and call us. And then, or we get the majority via email. Well, I wouldn't say the majority, because lately we haven't been getting that many complaints.
We do have a form to fill out, a
Yeah.
form that they can fill out that then travels to the executive director and so,
Operations.
yeah, and operations and
How do they get that form?
From the front desk, or on our website.
the bus drivers actually have them on the bus.
Right.
They actually have them on the bus as well,
Okay,
so they can hand them that form.
Rebecca?
Okay, this is all good, and I know we rely on this, but it just, to me, I really think that sometimes it's gonna require getting on the bus and asking people, or standing at the bus station. I had an opportunity to do that for a couple of days. When we were shopping out our new app for, people could buy a ticket on their phone. And it really gave me an insight as, there's our people right there in real time, having the real experience. And, that might be like the best way to gather observations. And so, we can do all these things, about posting stuff and having a website and online stuff. Now that's a big hurdle for even the most vested person in having, you know, the tools and everything, the resources, the time to pursue, you know, going through the normal channels to do a grievance or you know, customer suggestion, you know, kind of. And I think a lot of times people think, oh yeah, I should say something, but I'm just don't have time or I don't want to. And so I think that it's, although we're trying, I'm not sure if that's the most effective way to get feedback from the users and also from the community. I know we try, and believe me, every agency, that's probably one of the weakest links, is to get valuable feedback, you know, in real time and you know, from people, you know, when it's fresh. So I think that we could probably do better. Now, I'm happy to be persuaded to the contrary if that is the case. But to me, you know, I'm just not sure how satisfied people are. I mean, I think if they use it consistently and they get into a groove and they have the resources and everything, and you know, they use it consistently, then they probably have a higher level. You know, people that kind of get on and off and maybe less frequent users, maybe they, you know, there are some valid there's some valid feedback that we're not capturing. So I'd say that's, you know, may have some room for improvement, just from my, like I said, my observations. Thank you.
So I've noticed that if somebody really has a complaint, we see them at our meetings, and we're not seeing that so much anymore. We had, when we had to cut back, we had a few people show up at our meetings on video saying, you know, I can't get to work and stuff, but we had to cut back our services because we didn't have bus drivers and there's not much else we can do for something like that. But also the fat tire thing. When the people that wanted to be able to use their bike, put the bikes with the fat tires. So I think if it's really that important to them, they do come to us during our meetings. And we just don't have a lot of that.
And I just wanted to give the example of when I was at the cinema station one morning, and I was there for some other reason. I can't remember exactly what it was, getting a haircut or something. Anyway, a gentleman, Spanish speaking, came up, was pointing to his phone. We had a schedule change and he couldn't understand that because it was not in the right vernacular. And so I was frustrated because I sat in French class behind Glenna Taylor instead of the Spanish class where I could have used something like that and I would have been functional. So yeah, that has changed. Now, he would not have had that problem now that we've done this work. So we're making progress.
So are tickets being purchased, is a growing number of people buying tickets using the cell phone app? Have you seen a radical increase or?
You know, I don't know if it's radical or not. You know, I do see an increase, you know, obviously we sell the most monthly passes at the beginning of the month. And so when I get the report from Token Transit on my email right after the first of the month, I mean, there's a huge spike obviously there. But I don't know if it's a radical increase. We're still selling some, you know, paper monthly passes.
Within the app itself, is there an area for a customer to make a comment?
I don't know. I'd have to look at that.
That might be an avenue. If they
Yeah.
become accustomed to using the app to purchase tickets, maybe it's not a big step. And to add an area, would you like to make a comment, or thumbs up, thumbs down, something that can give you a better sense?
Because I know it's either Token Transit or the other app, the Transit app, where they can find out where the bus is at. One of them we can't use for they do surveys and outreach.
That's cool.
I'll look at that.
Okay, comments. So overall, I'm getting the consensus that you're pretty happy with the level of customer service. Is that a fair statement?
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
To refer back to some of the rider input that we have gotten in doing many major changes in our planning. I mean, we do go out and do that when there's a subject matter, but we don't do a lot of just random, which we could do, but I'm just saying, we have definitely done a lot of interviews with gotten rider input. We also,
How do you get that input?
we set up a time and place where we have a table and information available about what we're talking about, and we go from community to community.
Like Sunday markets?
Yeah, and just right on the street, right in the storefront, we ask permission from the storefront, so we can catch this, you know, not just it be staged, but so that we can catch just normal people, input. And we also have had, board meetings in other locations so that we can, and announce them way ahead of time, so that we can get people from that community who can't make it to the board meeting here to have their input from other communities, so.
Okay.
We get
You
done.
know, Zoom has been a great platform for us as far as broadcasting our meetings, but then going back, people can go back and watch our meetings, and you can't pay enough for that amount of outreach. We got through that, so that was wonderful. And you know, the one thing about customer service, you know, Deanna mentioned something about somebody frustrated because it was a driver issue. I haven't seen a complaint about a driver in probably at least a year. Which I think that's a testament to the operations staff and their monthly meetings and talking about customer service and things. So,
Training.
Yeah.
Training.
So on the Go app, that's on the Transit app, so there is a place you can each rider can produce a profile and comment on time, comment on driver things. And so there is an input device
Which
on
app
that.
is that on? Is that on the Transit app? or-
Yeah, it's on where there's like the map pumpkin.
You can show me later, Tracy.
Yeah.
Keep going, so that's
There you go.
interesting.
Great.
Okay, so overall, I'm still in a good column. Is that still pretty fair to say with you folks? You good with that, Rebecca? We filled in the last.
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Charles, you good?
Charles is on a break.
Charles is.
Where'd Charles go?
Nice shirt, Charles.
There
Here he is.
I'm sorry, that was a old man bathroom break.
All right, let's move into personnel administration. So again, from the board's perspective, how would you classify staff morale and the work climate?
From what's reported back to us, the staff is recognized often. Like there's these little acts of kindness and generosity and just like, hey, we care about you, we value you. We're always invited, well, not always, but we're invited to attend many of the events or gatherings or any celebrations. And to the ones that I've been, it always feels calm and like everybody feels at ease around each other. And I've been to other places in which people are like, I'm not gonna go there, like, why am I gonna go there and have a slice of pizza? In this case, no, everybody seems very just calm and at ease. So from what is reported to us and from what I've seen, I think that the staff feels that they're valued, that they're treated properly.
Good.
Mikey likes
That's
it.
good.
Mikey likes it. That was my comment.
Charles, your turn.
When we do our board evaluation, our ED evaluation, I've served on several of those. We take in consideration the employee's response. And we often go to the negative because we think that person, it could be symptomatic of more people. And there's not a lot of negativity that we get from those evaluations from the staff. Obviously, in being a leader, as Jeff is, and his senior staff, there's always been somebody who complains, right? It would be weird if no one ever complained, but we just don't hear many complaints at our level. And I think if there was a problem ongoing, I do believe Jeff or Sue would tell us and we would know, but we don't see anything really.
Rebecca,
Actually, referring to my previous comments, one of the things I was gonna say, we'd hear from the department heads. We don't, of course, it's not practical for us to hear from every single staff employee. And that also, if there are issues, what's the range of what can happen? An employee may feel reluctant to say anything, so we may not be capturing some of the comments. Did you want to say something, Jim?
oh, I'm good.
Oh, I thought I heard something. So I mean, I by nature, it is not totally conclusive, but and we, for privacy's sake, maybe we wouldn't be privy to all of that and find out what some of the issues are. I'm not sure, maybe through the unions, maybe they are more, the staff that are involved with the union may be more forthcoming with their union representatives to talk about grievances. And then I guess I'm not, I don't know how those are referred back to administration for data collection and attendance to the issue. So I guess it's more of a question maybe for Jeff. Is it how that, that loops around and is dealt with?
Yeah, well, in the first 3 years of having a collective bargaining agreement, we haven't had one single grievance. So
That's a good sign.
we have a great relationship with our union and with our union rep and with all the employees.
Debbie?
So this past evaluation that we did on Jeff, I kind of purposely, Sue was going through some of the people, not names, but who we could send evaluations out to. And she kind of said something about one, and I said, no, send that person one. Because she kind of had this negative, I get this feeling of we might hear something negative. Yes, I was looking for something negative. And it did come back a little bit negative, but what impressed me was that Sue took it upon herself. I'm gonna go talk to this person and see. And it ended up being that it had really nothing to do with Jeff at all. But it had to do with overall work, but she was able to get it worked out and find out what the problem was. So I think if there are any issues or if our HR person thinks that there might be a problem with somebody, I think she takes it upon herself to go and find out. And I know my husband's not the best at getting messages to me. We own the store across the street. And there's been a couple of times when somebody will come in, either a passenger or somebody that works here, and he'll just say, hey, is Debbie here? And I'm never over there once in a while. And he'll come in and he'll say, well, somebody came looking for you from the transit district, but I don't know who it was. So, and I think, so if they're looking for somebody, they know where to go to find a board member. If it's important, they'll keep coming back. Unless it's just to say hi or something.
It's a tough question that we're asking. Charles, go ahead.
I think the consensus really is that there's an open door policy at the district. I think, and I think the word gets around. Still going to that employee gets the word out, right? They're really listening to us. And I think they may not say this to the new employees, but I do believe the tone there is an open door policy, that if you have a complaint, that you can come in and talk to someone. I don't know if Jeff and you guys say that to new hires, but I think that's the understanding that they can come to.
Can you define what you mean by open door policy? Is it open door to Jeff or to
So
anybody?
they're immediate supervisors, whoever their supervisor. I think when Paul was here, I think that drivers would go to him, and I think that Sue being in HR, going back to this particular client employee that she asked, I think that sort of enhances that open door policy. Like I said, we may not have it stated, or it may not be in the employee in the new hire package, but it seems to be the knowledge there that if you have a complaint, you can talk to someone. I don't think they feel ashamed.
And my door is truly open. I'm always gonna ask them the question, did you talk to your supervisor about it? Because I wanna make sure that they're going through the right channels, because their supervisor could handle it a lot better than I could probably handle it, whatever the issue was, so.
Sure.
Rarely does anybody come and see me upstairs. I have to go ride the buses to see anybody.
Do you, as a board, have opportunities, or you're encouraging it to have kind of social interaction, like a picnic or some organizational wide opportunity to just socially get to know one another?
We do a holiday party.
Holiday party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Holiday party.
And do you find that to be helpful, and you do learn?
I like it. I've always enjoyed it.
Well, and there's other times during the year, like the
The meetings.
appreciation meeting the other day, we're always welcome to join. And I try to make as many of them as I can, even if it's just for a few minutes, just to poke my head in. And there's a very comfortable feeling about it. So it's like they want to be there. It's not that they have to be there, but
I think you're a lot like me, is that I know when there's a problem because I can smell it. There's an extra sensory perception that you can walk through an office organization, been through so many times, that I could sense where the problems were, who the problem people are, and if there's a lack of communication, between staff and their supervisors. But I'm so glad to hear, and I'm not surprised, but still glad to hear that that's not the case. Both Charles and Rebecca, your hand came up recently.
No, I have a delayed hand, sorry.
Go ahead, Charles. Oh,
I
okay.
had
The
a
one-
hand, sorry.
The one extra comment I wanted to make was, of course, the obvious is that, it's been hard to gather, because of COVID. And also we're a really big geographic area, and it's been really so convenient and so effective to meet on Zoom. But the downside of Zoom is that you're not in person. But the other thing too is that for people who are really, uber cautious about COVID spread, there are times when I'm reluctant to gather with people that I know that there's kind of a mix in terms of people being vaccinated. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the management of employee performance. Let me just start with asking you as commissioners, what's your perception of how does that happen? How does employee performance take place? How does performance evaluation with employees, how does that happen?
I think Sue does some every year. Sounds like, I think I've gotten that too. Does Sue do evaluations every year?
Pardon?
Does Sue do evaluations every year? with
She doesn't
employees?
do them. She
Or the
sends it out to the
supervisors.
supervisors.
Okay,
Area supervisors meet with the employee, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so that happens back and forth, and I do that in my employment too. We have
that's a good question. So an employee has an evaluation conversation with their direct supervisor,
yes.
and then what happens to that information? What does that supervisor do with that? That's probably more for you than.
That's a good question.
Well, it becomes part of their file, We also have coaching logs, so as conversations happen throughout the year, whether positive or negative, they're to log those on the coaching log. And that helps them at the end of the year when they do the employee's evaluation, they can go back and review the notes from the coaching log. Oh yeah, I talked to them about this and I got solved that day. It's not an issue anymore.
So do you have conversations then with supervisors about how, so tell me how your employee evaluation with John went?
I don't.
Did you get into that kind of?
I personally don't, as far as the driver supervisors, Jennifer, the operations manager, would be involved at that level. She would do it.
So do you feel as a board that this, I mean, I can tell you that unless performance evaluations are done productively, they can turn into a disaster. It can turn to the worst thing that happens is that, oh man, here we go again. We got to do this stupid annual employee evaluations and it's just a big waste of time. That's not unusual in many organizations. What's your perception about those annual performance evaluations? I've always thought as a supervisor that it's an opportunity to provide praise and remind them of their accomplishments first and foremost, and that if there's a problem, then we address that. But for me, an evaluation is not to find fault, but to find opportunity for praise. Sometimes fault needs to be disclosed and correction needs to happen. So
Go ahead.
So I was fortunate enough to have, soon after I was appointed to the board, there was an SDAO conference and I took the introductory for board members. And it kind of got very clear to me that it's not proper for us as board members to have direct relationships with the employees.
Correct.
If it's personal, it's personal, but like that, so I kind of got a little concerned about that, and it's like, all right. So our employee is Jeff. Jeff oversees
Yeah.
supervisors and everybody else.
Yeah.
So that's why it's kind of like what's reported to us, I think that the board has a great relationship with all of the heads of our departments. We see them mostly every month. And they're they tell us about everything, they have answers. If they don't, they take note, the following month, they get back to us. But how it works directly with the employees, I have no idea. And I don't think I should know. Because I don't think that's what a board member should do.
Correct.
So that's why it's I don't know, I have literally no opinion on this. I don't know what they do, how often they do it, what the collection is done, I don't know, I don't think I should.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that, because we did have an incident where we had a board member managing things. Jeff's our employee,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, don't,
and
yeah.
as far, we'll do his evaluation, and he does the rest.
Rebecca,
I agree with that, but I'd also like to say that a way that would be helpful for us as a governing body for Jeff to express to us how the organization does handle these kinds of issues so that we have at least we have an understanding of how they are dealt with, not as, personal case studies or anything like that, but that we know that these things are happening. So I think we do basically, I'm not sure if he or any of the other department heads are sharing those reports with us. I don't mean reports, but just expressing to us that how these things are handled and, that they're staying on top of it. If I have been remiss and we've had those conversations, I may have forgotten them, but Jeff, is that something that you have shared with us in the past?
Well, I really haven't, because it's, again, internal, personnel issues, or not necessarily issues, but procedures. I will say, when first few years I was on board, I did review every single evaluation for every employee, because I wanted to see how the supervisors and managers were writing them. because the evaluation time is not a time for surprises. No employee should ever be surprised by anything they see in an evaluation. And that's the importance of coaching logs and why I instituted those when I first got hired. But, so I did that the first few years. After that, I was very comfortable with the staff, with, when Paul got hired as operations and other managers and supervisors were promoted, I got comfortable with them. I don't see the evaluations anymore.
Well, that's what I meant, is that we're at that place ourselves. We don't want to do the nitty gritty and it's not appropriate, et cetera. But that we know that those processes are taking place and they're effective.
That was a pretty darn good way of kind of closing that up, Rebecca, is that Diane is correct. It's not the board's responsibility or not your territory to get involved with employee evaluations. That is a staff function managed by your executive director. So the question for you as the board is, are you pretty comfortable and have confidence that that's working well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really the issue, is that you don't really need to know the nitty gritty, and the nitty gritty would only cause problems to begin with, so.
I was
Keeping
very
that-
scared after that one day told us like, all right,
Yeah. I'll report back.
like how many of us here, like, yeah.
It was very
I got
effective
ready.
training, that was.
It was.
I can't tell you the number of times that we've had issues that pop up in an organization of severe conflict when a board member decides that that's their responsibility to dive into a personnel issue.
Yeah.
That's when.
It goes
It's the thing.
nuclear.
So these are good questions, you got great answers for them, is that, yes, I reading your comments between all the lines is that you're comfortable and confident the staff's got a good handle on these evaluations. And I'm really pleased to hear that you know that that's not in your ballpark. But it is in your ballpark to have a sense that it's happening.
Yeah.
And that it's productive. And so I don't think I have any smarter to say than that right now. The next question is, as the board, are you comfortable with the alignment of work responsibilities to the job position? Are people doing what's in their, what are their responsibilities and not being tasked with things that are not their responsibility? You may not know any of the answers, but you probably only know the answer if somebody complains about something. So, Rebecca.
Yeah, I would say that, getting good reporting from the department heads and the information that we need, in all aspects. I think it makes me feel comfortable that people are, you got this is like a mom joke, but you got the right people on the bus and you got the right people in the right seats. So, it seems like everybody, is, we're covering those bases within the departments. And I don't know, I'm assuming, I'm making a high assumption because it seems like it's functioning quite well, but, I'll ask another question of Jeff. Are there times when, you determine that you have to reassign some things, a little bit of tweaking on assignments?
Every position has a job description, and those are things that, I've tasked Sue with looking at those and making sure, anytime we have an opening, let's look at the job description. Is it really what that person or what that position does? Is the work that's being done? And then we engage that person that maybe just left or whatever. Is this a true document? Do we need to change it at all? As far as tweaking, we really haven't had to do that much of it. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head that we've had to do that. I had another thought I was going to share and I can't remember what it was now. I'll think of it.
Job descriptions.
Huh?
Was it job descriptions?
No.
Alignment of responsibilities.
I don't remember. I was gonna give an example of something and I don't remember what I was gonna say. Oh, no, I know what I was gonna remember to say. Mary walked back in the room. That's right.
Good to know.
Previous to, and I appreciate what the board has talked about, that they appreciate the leadership team being at the board meetings and giving a monthly report. Mary told me, prior to my time, leadership team members weren't allowed to come to board meetings. They were not allowed. And I said, well, on my day one, I said, oh no, I need them there because I don't know anything about the district. I rely on my team. So I do want them at the board meetings, and that's why I have them do a board report each month. That way you get a better sense of what's going on in their departments, because they're smarter than me in what goes on internally, so.
It's a great strategy.
Oh, I can't imagine it doing it any other way. I really can't. And that's what was ingrained with me in my previous career, so.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
to me, I like staff getting reports because I can tell in the staff member delivery, their enthusiasm for their job, how much they love and like doing their job, how outside the box they're thinking on their job. If you're reading a report, it will be you reading a report. So I like having the staff do their own reports. It gives me a sense of how they love their jobs.
And also if we have like a compliment or something, we get to give it to them directly.
Yeah.
Instead of like, oh, hey, the board says good job. Like, no,
Yeah.
we get to give
And
them.
that's why I did that this morning, talking about Jason when Jason was up there and how I just got back from Arkansas and I met a guy and talked with the guy socially and brought up Jason, and he knew Jason, he had interacted with him. So that was a nice connection. That's why I, complimented Jason, because he's really made a name for himself, but also the district as well on a nationwide basis.
All right, we're coming to our last section of policies and procedures. We can wrap this up in a little bit, but let's start with your sense as the board member of the soundness of the administrative policies. I can expand a little bit and use it an example of a policy would be, do all employees have a job description? Imagine that they all do.
I know that Mary's been updating those, or not Mary, sorry, Mary. Sue has been working on getting those updated if they needed to be updated. And she didn't report, so I assume she was probably finished with them,
The job descriptions?
or really close.
I don't think they're completely finalized, but going along with that, the new employee policies, procedures. She's got the drafts done. We're gonna be meeting next week.
Very next question.
Yeah, I know. I knew it was coming.
Because they're so important. Everybody needs to know what lane that they're supposed to be driving in. And to know the limits of their abilities to make decisions, spending money, those types of policies. So it's good to hear that those are being updated. Do you have those reviewed by legal counsel once policies are?
For the employee personnel manual, those are reviewed by HR Answers.
Okay.
They help us with that. And then, like I said, Sue and I will be meeting next week. I've got the drafts, but I was in Arkansas this week, so I haven't reviewed it. We'll be doing that early next week.
Okay.
But then we also have the fiscal policies, talking about, like what my spending authority is and those kind of things.
And once a year are those limits restated? Typically in organizations like this, that your limits of spending, for instance, and what authorities do you have are restated on an annual basis?
We haven't restated.
We haven't at the beginning of the fiscal year.
We haven't done that.
I don't know that that's a requirement or if that's a legal requirement, but it's kind of a nice thing to do. It removes the questions of, Jeff can't spend that kind of money. And Jeff would say, yes, I can. It's right here. And the authority that was given to me, approved by the
You
commission.
can't,
Did we do that in our
you have
agreement?
your credit card,
Well, that's separate.
so yeah.
I think it's a board policy. Your spending, I believe, is
It is.
included in a board.
Well, it's in our fiscal policies, but I think it transferred into our board policy as well. But we don't restate that.
Yeah, it's a spending authority. Where is that line? Typically, I mean, it's usually a number, and it depends on the size of the organization for it. As for instance, I can spend up to $25,000 if it's a budgeted line item and it's within the budget. And if it's outside of that, then it needs to go to the commissioner.
We're also notified of those things, like, if a few members of staff are gonna go to a conference that's, out of state. The previous board meeting, Jeff will let us know, like, hey, we're gonna, my English is not fluent. We're going to increase the limit on the credit card because we're gonna go and do and it would be a problem. So then they let us know, and then as soon as it comes back, it's like, okay, we brought it down to, so we're always kind of told if any spending is gonna go up from what was previously approved, so.
Okay. Rebecca, Charles, any comments?
No, I feel confident in the, both administrative policies and fiscal policies. I think they're transparent. And we've been briefed on them.
Are there written board policies? And how frequent do you look at those, or how often are they updated?
So that's one thing I'm gonna take responsibility for. We haven't added any new ones in a while. And I need to get a committee together to go over some new ones or some revised ones.
Sure.
Do you mean the board responsibilities?
Board policies.
Is that different from responsibilities?
Well, that is a policy. Board responsibilities is a policy, but there's other board policies that are in place that you guys have that we look at periodically to see if they need to be updated.
It would be nice that when you're a new board member, you receive a packet.
Oh, you get them all?
You get them all.
Yes, I know that.
They're in the big book, aren't they?
Yeah,
Aren't they in the big book?
yes.
So that,
Yeah.
So, but when policies change, you don't have a nice packet. You have to sort of pull it from whatever.
we haven't changed it.
Well, when we change them, and we haven't changed any in a while, it goes before the full board. The board policy committee will introduce it to the board to adopt.
We did quite a lot of that when Kathy was board chair,
Yeah,
and Kathy, and both Kathy and Paul did a lot of that work, and we haven't done that recently, obviously, because you guys aren't aware of it, so. But yeah, we need to go back there.
What typically happens is policies get added on top of policies that are no longer necessary, and you end up with the big book.
Yeah.
So that's a real good reason why that is take the opportunity to, well, we don't need this because this doesn't apply anymore.
right.
And
And that's what we did last time around,
Yeah.
Or this policy outlines how you do something, that's not reality, here's the reality.
In planning, what they do is, because there's more legality in planning than what we do, is that they have what's called housekeeping in terms of you get rid of stuff you're not using, or there's contradiction in policy. And that would perhaps is a suggestion of having like a housekeeping as well, so you don't end up one day defending two contradictory
Yeah.
policies or something like that. And everyone's clear on what actually is not appropriate is the rule. The other thing is that with the board responsibilities, I had looked at it, and since I've been looking at a lot of things, I've lost it. But
lost it altogether, or just lost a document?
well, we will go on to that. It's, when I read it, and I know it took a long time for it to be produced, it didn't say much to me. And, be respectful. Would you think I'm here to start a guerrilla warfare? No. I mean, that's something you might say in a neighborhood meeting, which can be a problem. But I didn't get a feeling after all these years of where my limits are. And I don't mean to be I want to, supervise all your employees.
Right.
No, I just want to know, what my limits are and what isn't my limits. In other words, is there a certain area I can go wild? No, we're gonna take away.
I would say no.
There are commissioners in this county that do go wild every once in a while.
Yeah. No, did you ever have any at the port though?
I'm still trying to imagine Pamela going wild. And I'm still trying to wrap my head.
That would be something. If there's something that you would like to help with, we need to facilitate that process or take some outside eyes on it, I'd be happy to help you.
I'm good with it. When the policies were board policies were first set up, Paul was who just retired from us because I stole him from the board. He used to be the board chair and he worked with SDAO on setting up all the board policies. Total detail.
But it was also a really volatile time. We were coming out of a really
They don't have any board
Yes,
policies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's been
very
common.
volatile.
And then, and that's what we're talking about here was with Paul's, when we could call that the first years. And Kathy's term, we would call, we were trying to broaden things out again. And now, I think we're at that point where we might want to address what, as Jeff said, we want to revisit that and blend it together. Okay?
And I did look at SDAO, board responsibilities, and they still are vague.
Yeah, they,
Just-
SDAO.
That's purposeful.
That's purposeful, but there's vague and then there's really vague.
Rebecca?
Okay, all I'd like to add to that is that I think it is pretty prescribed, pretty narrow. We have a narrow focus of really what our responsibilities are and for the board. So I agree. I think that we need to maybe, find time at some point, to talk about that, because I'm an idea person, but it would be good, like Pamela says, to know really what the parameters are. And there could be a time and place for, broad brush approach to, brainstorming, where we would fit that into annually. There would be an opportunity for those kinds of things, occasionally, like today, earlier, I brought up an idea, and I think that if it's, given to the right person, it's not like a command or anything, but it's mainly just feedback. But it would be nice to know define our parameters and make sure that we have the opportunity to express ourselves at some point during the year with, some bigger ideas. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions today that you wish I would ask that I haven't yet?
No, but just to follow up with what Rebecca just said, a time set aside for us, and we, because of the pandemic, have not had a board retreat. I would like to work towards that if we could, Madam Chair.
Yes, we are working at that one.
Okay, that would be fine, because I think that would, as we've discussed here today, ideas are brought up, we could do also at that retreat.
So we're working towards that one.
Okay,
Okay. Anything else you wish that we could talk about that we haven't yet? Charles, anything on your mind?
No, I think it was a wonderful event. I think learned a lot, and I think we've established some things. And how do we do these? Is this once a year?
No, we haven't done this for 5 years.
I thought not. I wasn't sure if I just didn't remember. But will we do them yearly or another 5 years?
There's no prescription for when to do that. Typically, a good time to do that is well, now to talk about when things are going well and if you want to fine tune. Another good time to talk about was when there's a real conflict or trouble within the board itself and feels like it's gotten off track or off kilter. Or the next would be when there's a substantial overturn of the board. So you've got, 3 or 4 new members that are coming on the board.
The last time we did it, Tracy was the only one that's
That's right.
still here,
Yeah.
still on the board.
So SDL provides a number of services.
Right.
And one of those new services that have been announced is the mentoring. So, and the mentoring is it's a broad definition. It could be mentoring to the board, it could be mentoring to an executive director. There's really no real limitation, is that we've got a number of old folks like me on SDL as senior consultants. You can't be a senior consultant unless you're really a senior. So, and then you don't have any obligation towards memory, so that's. So, and there's frequent bathroom breaks too, that's the other good thing.
That's what I'm talking about.
So, if you would like some outside input, I've been doing facilitation my entire life and in much more volatile circumstances than even my prior career. I was on the board of directors of an international dispute resolution organization where we trained people in third world countries that were in war zones of how to communicate with one another and how to bring peace. I've worked in the Hilltop neighborhood of Tacoma, which at the time in the late 1980s and early 90s was the most violent neighborhood on the entire West Coast. And my role was to bring peace between gangs and the business community and law enforcement. So I'm not shy about, getting involved in conflicts and finding peaceful resolutions to disputes. So it's a broad background that we can provide, and including myself, so.
And you survived the Board of Astoria meeting, so.
I survived.
And we know who was there.
It took about 18 months, to be honest with you, to recover, and having 7 ducks and 5 chickens helped a lot, so.
Chicken therapy.
Yeah, I really appreciate this time with you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim, for your time today.
Thank you, Jim.
Very much.
Very welcome. It was great to meet all of you, and I hope to come back again and just have conversations, so.
You can join our meetings anytime,
Yeah.
monthly, via Zoom if you want.
Oh,
Show us a chicken.
yeah. Thank you. All right, thanks,
All right.
thanks for the opportunity.
All right, so the meeting is adjourned.
So the next step is I'll be sending you a report to.
Do we
it
give
goes-
you these or do we keep?